do it. Hello, and welcome to And Away We Go F1 Podcast, a Formula One podcast that goes beyond the track limits to talk about travel, food and lifestyle surrounding the sport. I'm Diane Bortoletto, a pre-Drive to Survive Formula One fan, and today I'm back in Perth. And I've got a very special guest for you today, Matt Clayton, who is a Formula One journalist, motorsport journalist, really covers all sorts of motorsport codes, not just Formula One. Welcome to the show, Matt.
Great to be here. Always like to make a connection back to the left coast, the left coast is the best coast, as I should be saying. So obviously I grew up over there, so Perth's never far from my thoughts. So it's always great to reconnect and maybe exhale after this F1 season, hey?
Oh, wow, yeah. A week post Abu Dhabi, the finale of the 2025 season, which as a race, there was one great manoeuvre, done by Oscar Piastri, but the rest of the race was, like I said in last week's episode, if we were watching that in round 10 or round 12, we'd be like, oh, so boring.
And that's kind of the problem with that place, because if we often get down to this championship decider, we've got all the excitement of, we don't know what's going to happen. But of course, when you go to a race in Abu Dhabi, you know exactly what's going to happen, because whoever qualifies on pole is going to win the race. I wrote this a few times over the weekend. The last 11 pole sitters have won in Abu Dhabi. It's a stronger pole to win record than Monaco, which sounds absolutely crazy. It's the track on the calendar where if you qualify on pole, you are going to win.
Wow. More so than Monaco. I mean, and Monaco's a track where you can't overtake, with the cars of the current width. Whereas Abu Dhabi, there are overtaking opportunities.
Theoretically,
Jeez, wow, what a stat. Yeah, we were just having a chat before I hit record, talking about what races would be a good one to end the season on. And you suggested Austin. And I think that is a brilliant idea, because that'd be just the biggest party, wouldn't it, for everyone? Like, everyone always talks about the great atmosphere in Austin, and it always delivers as well as far as an awesome F1 weekend.
Yeah, like it's not just about the race, it's a spectacle. Like, you need it in a town that really comes alive and embraces it. Now, I mean, I'm not a genius on US geography and weather patterns in Austin in early December. Maybe we'd have to bring the season forward. But in terms of good track, close to a big city, a city that embraces it, a city that's got a party vibe, attracts a lot of people from a lot of places, it would be right up there in terms of, and I'm kind of surprised actually, with Liberty Media and everything now, you're kind of surprised they haven't really pushed as much for the US to be the final round of the season. But as we were sort of saying off air before, the one thing we do know about Formula One, no matter who owns it, Bernie or Liberty, money talks, right? So Abu Dhabi's got deeper pockets than everybody else. So I think that shows you why we're there.
Yeah, and they've probably got it in their contract to be the final race of the season, just because, if we have seasons like we've had this year and in previous years where it's come down to the final race, all eyeballs are going to be on Abu Dhabi. So perhaps that's a condition of where they sit in the calendar in their contract.
Completely.
Well, Matt, tell us a little bit about you and your Formula One career, because, you're a journalist and you've worked in the sport for, Tell us. A long time.
It's too long, yeah. I'm trying to think. So it was one of those things, I grew up around it to a degree because my dad particularly was really into it. So I'm British born, and so he grew up as a kid over there. Big Graham Hill fan when he was a kid. Used to go to various races, bits and pieces, and we moved here when I was really young. And it was always one of those things that was kind of on. Growing up in Perth, it's a kind time zone to watch races in Europe, which is something I definitely miss. But it wasn't until I moved to Melbourne in the mid-90s, just after Melbourne got that first race in 96, and I was working for News Limited at the time. They had a magazine division that they were starting that was effectively going to be putting together all the official event programs for all of the major sporting events, and that was what they did at the time. It was very sort of early, nascent internet, like nothing that you see these days. And so more sort of fell into this role of working on the event program for the 1998 magazine when I was in there. And it was one of those things, yes, I'm old. It does show you how different things were back in those days. And so 98 was the first one I sort of worked on. 99 was the first one that I had a very, very big involvement in. That's an involvement that has never changed. I have contributed to every single one of those programs for the past 27 years, which is pretty nuts. But it became... Wow. It became much more of a thing, I guess, early 2000s for me. I started to travel a fair bit more. I moved up through the ranks when I was at News at their custom publishing division. So I became their managing editor in my late 20s, which is probably ahead of schedule, really. But with that came some more responsibility, a chance to travel a bit. And then I had the bright idea that I would go freelance. 2007, I would say, something along those lines. And the theory was that if it didn't work, I could always go back and get a full-time job and be gainfully employed by somebody else if it didn't work. And the good news is I haven't had to go and do that. So it's been about 20 odd years now. And as you mentioned in your intro, I've morphed a bit more. I've probably been doing MotoGP simultaneously for the last 20 something years. And so you try and cobble together as much things as you can as a freelancer, and you morph into newspaper writing, magazine writing, podcasting's become a big thing. And it's one of those things.
Yeah, tell us about your podcast. Sorry, I should have introduced you as well as having a awesome podcast with Michael Lemonato. So give us a rundown of what that is.
It's actually funny. Like the first podcast, I remember it was one of those light bulb moments that you have. I was living in inner city Melbourne at the time. It was like 2010s, I would say, when nobody had a podcast, where everybody does these days. And I remember just seeing the traffic was completely gridlocked. I lived in Richmond at the time, so I was right near Punt Road in Melbourne, super busy arterial, no one going anywhere. And I just thought to myself, what are all these poor people doing sitting here in traffic? What are they listening to? What are they doing? And then I thought, well, the connections that I've got through the sport, wouldn't it be interesting if you were able to get some of these people onto talks in a very early podcast style? And I went to the Australian Grand Prix Corporation about the idea, and their first thing they said was, what's a podcast? Which was, 2011. This is something a lot of people used to say back then. And we started one from pretty much ground zero simply because I told them I could get an awesome first guest. And my first guest after his first Formula One race was a young West Australian kid called Daniel Ricciardo, I'd known Daniel for quite a while. He'd done those couple of races with HRT back in 2011 when he first started before he went to Toro Rosso. Neither he nor I had any clue what we were doing, but we just basically got on the end of it. I think it was a phone line. It was no video or anything. And we just had a chat, and it was super casual, but it did really good business because everyone was like, what's this? And it was like, all right, that's probably something that we should work on. And that lasted for a little while and came and went. So COVID happened. Obviously, it's a very different COVID experience for everyone on the East Coast, and particularly in Victoria, than it was for anywhere else in Australia. And, there was no sport being played. Everyone had way too much time and needed content, right? And so, again, went back to the Australian Grand Prix Corporation and managed to extract budget. They said, well, I'll give you budget for 8 episodes. So my first thought was I need a great co-host, and Michael Lemonato, for anyone that reads his Formula One stuff on foxsports.com.au at the moment, is probably the best guy in it in Australia in terms of what he knows and how he goes about it. He's just a complete pro. He and I work really, really well together, so it was going to be fun for us doing that. And we had 8 episodes, and I'm like, all right, let's delve deep into the phone here and see how many great contacts I can get for these first 8 so they absolutely rate their heads off. In that first 8, I'm doing this off the top of my head now because I can't 100% remember. I know that Daniel was episode 1, and we recorded that when he was holed up on his farm in the southwest of Western Australia because he couldn't fly anywhere after the Australian Grand Prix got cancelled. But in that first 8, we had Jenson Button, we had David Coulthard. The one that I'm most proud of, we managed to track Murray Walker down before Murray passed about 18 months later. And Murray was easily in his 90s at that point, and he wasn't keen on doing it over Zoom, but so we arranged something where we just did it over the phone. And he spoke unbelievably lucidly and with all that passion that Murray has. I think we got maybe 2 questions in, and then each answer was about 45 minutes long, as you can imagine, if we went off on tangents. But he was absolutely amazing. And so we pulled out as many big guns in these first 8 that we could possibly get. And then, of course, it caught on. And so we did, a couple of 100 episodes of that over a couple of years. But the one you mentioned at the beginning of this, so Michael and I now host the Fox Sports Pit Talk podcast. So he and I do a Formula One version each week, and myself and Renita Vermeulen, who is the younger sister of Chris Vermeulen, former MotoGP rider, we do a 2-wheel MotoGP version each week. So what started off as a little bit of an idea and a bit of a side project has now become 2 podcasts a week for 48 weeks of the year. So it's become one of those things that was far bigger than anybody expected.
Oh, fantastic. And just for anyone listening who doesn't know who Murray Walker is, he was the voice of Formula One for, 30 years or something?
Probably longer than that.
So you're a Formula One podcast pioneer, and now you're still freelancing.
The classic thing when you're a freelancer changes every single year. I did a lot more traveling when I was younger and, less family and all that sort of stuff. There were some races that I would still try and get to as often as I could, mostly because I enjoyed the place so much. It wasn't hard to get me to go to Barcelona. It wasn't hard to get me to go to Suzuka. There's plenty of tracks around the place where the combination of the circuit and the people and the city is what makes it. So you would do a lot more traveling. I'm not traveling as much as I used to, but these days, I guess most of my work these days is in the podcast space. I'm still doing a lot of writing for The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald, or the 9 Group as they are these days, and still contributing for Fox and various one-off speaking engagements and hosting things. And it's, completely greater than the sum of its parts, and it keeps me out of mischief, which is the main thing.
So tell us, so you've interviewed loads of different Formula One drivers over the years. Are there any standout interviews that you've done, or anything perhaps totally unexpected that's thrown you when chatting to a driver or team personnel?
Yeah. When we first started the podcast, we always used to say that it was free to ask, and that we would ask anybody to come on, even if the chances of them coming on were decimal points of 1%. We thought we'd just push the boat out and see what the hell happened. And so this is going back a reasonable distance now. We thought, we'll contact Bernie Ecclestone's office. There's no chance this will happen, but let's just do it anyway. So, of course, we contacted them and, sent them emails and just completely ignored it. And then I got a one-line response, Mr. Ecclestone will be happy to speak to you tonight. Okay. And so we did this interview. This is for the Australian Grand Prix back in the day. And the interview time was for some god-awful hour, like 11 p.m. or something in Australia. So I got to the studio. We're ready to go at 11 o'clock, which became 11:30, which became 12. And we thought, how much longer do we give this? It's not going to happen. And then all of a sudden the phone rings. And, hang on a minute. And it was his PA, and Mr. Ecclestone is ready to speak to you now, and just puts me through, and we're just instantly live.
Wow.
We were completely not prepared. So I learned this the hard way. Ecclestone was a guy that when you interviewed him, you would get halfway through a question and he'd just interrupt you, and he'd challenge you on the question, or he'd ask you something else. His whole aim was to try and keep you off guard the entire time so he could control the conversation. And so I was a bit flummoxed by this, because we felt we never got a question out, and then he'd go off on a tangent, which is something he wanted to talk to. I'd try and steer it back to where I wanted to be. He'd interrupt my question and go off on another tangent. But then Bernie being Bernie, he just loved to make a bit of trouble. And he said, so you're looking for a headline then, aren't you? And I'm like, sure. And he said, I'll tell you what, if Melbourne would sign a 30-year contract with us, we'd come back to Melbourne for 30 years in a heartbeat, because we love being there. So there's your headline. And it was based on absolutely nothing other than him just trying to stir some things up. And I remember we did the interview and it finished, and it was one of those ones that's like, I'm not actually sure what happened there, but I'm sure there was something in there that's going to generate some headlines. And I remember calling the Herald Sun in Melbourne the next day and said, what's your front page for tomorrow? And they said, we don't have one yet. I said, guess what? Here's one for you. Bernie Ecclestone wants to sign a contract with Melbourne for 30 years. Which was based on nothing other than Bernie just rabble-rousing. And, of course, they ran with it. And so they ran with it. And then the next morning, all the morning TV shows picked it up. So Sunrise and the Today Show and all of them picked it up. And this thing just ran and ran for about 2 days based off some offhand comment that Bernie made on a podcast at midnight on a Tuesday or whatever it was that we had done it. And the amount of publicity that gave us and the kick along that it gave us, just on a classic Bernie throwaway line that generated 3 days worth of headlines. It was really interesting to me. It's like, this is why this guy is a genius at creating attention, because he knows how to manipulate all of this. The postscript to this was I had a subsequent chance to interview him for something a couple of years later. I can't even remember what it was for, but I was ready this time. I knew exactly the tactics he was going to employ through the interview. So when he interrupted me, I would just go and interrupt him. And so we had this really, really strange interview where I'm not sure either of us actually got a full sentence out at any point, because we were kind of sparring with one another. And it was more like fun. It was just a bit of a game at the end of it. And then we finished and he looked at me with this smile on his face. He said, I actually enjoyed that. And I think he enjoyed the fact that it was this sort of thrust and parry over, nothing that was particularly significant. But I'd chosen to play his game with him because I knew what was coming this time. And so that was probably one that is one of the more memorable ones. But the best ones you do, Di, are the ones where it's all very sort of not formal and not particularly scripted and a bit sort of ad hoc, and you just get talking to people and It was one of my trips to Perth. It was at the end of the season. I knew that Daniel was going to be home with his parents at that point. And he sent me a message and said, "Hey, mate, come over." I'm like, okay. So I just rocked up at the family house, and I grew up in Perth with a whole bunch of mates of mine who were Italian kids with big Italian families. So I knew how this works. So, of course, I walked into the house, and the first thing his mum tried to do was feed me, because it's like you've got to have like a full sit-down meal and everything else when you visit an Italian family. And we just sat there and just freewheeled for a bit. And they're the times where you get to understand the person so much better than that. He obviously felt comfortable enough at that point, because we'd known each other for a fair while, that I could be in his space and it wasn't going to be a problem. And I'm not even sure what we particularly talked about that was particularly memorable, but the one thing I do remember, and I did use for a story, was I exited the house through the family garage where his dad, Joe, was in there working on a car or what have you. And this garage is a Ferrari shrine, right? So every single available piece of wall is got a picture of a F1 Ferrari or a road-going Ferrari. And it was just red all over the place. And then there was this little 4x6 shot of Daniel driving a Red Bull car when he did one of the show car runs, like way, way back, like one of the first times Daniel ever drove a Formula One car. That was the only picture in the entire garage that wasn't red and wasn't of a Ferrari, and it was Joe's own son. And that just completely summed up the way that family is.
Well, that's hilarious. Like, he's just got this Ferrari shrine, and oh yeah, by the way, there's my kid.
My son's a Formula One driver. Yeah, exactly.
I just wanted to go back and ask you about the headline that you got with Bernie Ecclestone. So before you rang the Herald Sun and got that front page, did you run it past the Grand Prix Corporation, or did you just go for it and go, wow?
I mean, I sort of said to them, look, I've got something here that's going to have much more mainstream interest than just this little niche podcast that we're doing here. It's good publicity for the sport, which means it's good publicity for your event. And it's one of those things that, yes, you could say you'd like to be in Melbourne for 30 more years, but there's clearly a lot of negotiations and things that need to happen there. But the fact
very political.
Yeah, completely. But the fact that they could see that Formula One was interested in having a long-term tenure in Melbourne, and you forget that it wasn't like it was a small event before the whole Netflix phenomenon, but it certainly wasn't anything like it was now. And they would often sign quite short-term contracts as the way the sport tends to go there. And there was a lot of discussion at some points, like, will Formula One even stay here? They'd get a 2-year extension or a 3-year extension. It was still, I guess F1 had been in Melbourne 14 years or something at that point. So it was established, but not as established as some of the others. So there's always this, how long will they stay here? And the very fact that he was prepared to say, oh, look, I'd come here for 1 million years and it'd be fine. There was classic Bernie, because Bernie was very close with Ron Walker. And so he knew that there'd be positive effects to come up. Bernie knew exactly what he was doing. I was just a puppet in Bernie's little game that he was playing. Yeah. But it was one of those things that, it was one of those mutually beneficial relationships where, everyone won out of this. We got a massive amount of publicity for what we did on the podcast. The newspapers got front pages out of it. TV got segments out of it for morning TV. Everyone wins here. And they ended up signing a long-term contract extension, not quite 30 years, but they got a pretty long one. So, it's here. Wow. It's here in Melbourne until 2037. So it's a pretty good contract.
Yeah, it is. And, was Bernie, I imagine for a lot of journalists, interviewing Bernie Ecclestone would be really intimidating. And the fact that the second time especially, you came prepared and you were jousting with him, if you like, and not letting him control the conversation like you did the first time. Did you feel intimidated?
I never get particularly intimidated with these sorts of things, because at the end of the day, it's just people talking to people, right? And some people, there's a different way that you have to go about it. I mentioned before, Murray Walker, we asked 2 questions and the podcast went for an hour and 20 minutes. Whereas, Bernie enjoys the sport of it, I guess. When you interviewed Bernie face to face, he's very, very short and he has a very, very quiet voice. But there's also one of those things where you have to stoop down and lean forward towards Bernie, A, so you can hear him, and B, so you can get more towards his eye line. But that's all making sure that he controls the conversation. That's all part of the way it works. So there's all this non-verbal and subtle stuff that's going on that's all part of it. And so in that instance, for me, you can resist it and try and do things differently, but you're not going to get a great outcome out of that. You have to play the game. And if you play the game with him and he enjoys the game, then I think he's probably going to give you more than he would otherwise. But everyone's different. Yeah. There's certain people, there's certain drivers over the years that I've had great relationships with. There's other drivers who just want absolutely no part of it and will go out of their way to be deliberately obstructive for whatever reasons. They don't respect you. You're not important to them. You can't get them any more publicity. Who cares about you? So on and so forth. And there's others that will be absolutely fantastic and play the game. And then as soon as the interview's finished or the camera's turned off, then they turn into someone else like they've never seen you before. So there's people that fall into different categories with that sort of thing. But I guess in my position, it's just knowing your subject matter before you go in and knowing what you might be ready to deal with. Like Max Verstappen's an interesting interview these days because Max is quite, it's whether it's a nationalistic stereotype or what have you, I don't know, but he's quite to the point and quite abrupt. But you get great sound bites out of him, but you just can't expect it to go for very long. So you need to almost over-prepare for him. You need to have a lot up your sleeve because if he doesn't like the line of questioning, he's shutting that down and you need to have a plan B or a plan C or whatever it may be, where there's other guys who will just be a lot more happy to go with the flow. And you'll have these conversations where at the time it feels like it's going quite well. And then you listen to it at the end and it's like, oh, there's not really that much in there, is there? So it depends on the person. There's no sort of stereotypical Formula One interview, you might say. They're all different in their own ways, which could be age or nationalistic characteristics or what have you. But it's just being prepared for what's coming.
The mood they're in at the time.
Completely right.
Like they might have just had a terrible result and they're just like, oh, I don't want to talk to anybody about this.
Yeah.
Like, you see it in the TV pen all the time after races, especially people like Lewis Hamilton and Max. Like when they've had a great result, they give great interviews. But when Lewis, it's so hard watching him. It has been so hard watching him this season give interviews because the Ferrari is just not delivered for him. He's not got a handle on that car. Probably a bit of both. And he's just looked like a broken man so many times. Seeing a 7-time world champion that deflated week after week has been really hard to watch.
And that's one of the things that you would think that he's been around for so long now, right? He's 40 years old. You think that the sort of the peaks and troughs of the emotional roller coaster with him might be a bit more flattened out at this point. But he's still, that's just authentically who he is. When he's up and things are going well, he's a fantastic participant from a media point of view. When things are going badly, it's about as bad as it gets. And so he hasn't really changed, despite the fact that he's been in it now for so long. He still rides the roller coaster a fair bit, where some of the others, like they're a bit more flatline. You're not going to get the highs, but you're not going to get the lows either.
Yeah, Oscar Piastri, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly. Completely right.
Now, speaking of Oscar, our homegrown hero, Melbourne boy who finished third in the championship, who was leading the championship for, so long this year. And he had the whole country excited about Formula One, which was fantastic to see. What are your thoughts about McLaren, Lando, Oscar, favoritism, strategies, all of that?
Yeah, look, it's been, obviously, it's one of those headlines that's just run and run all year. I guess if you take the Oscar piece of this, I wrote something earlier in the week. After their first 3 years, I think Norris had 6 total podiums and no wins, and Max had won 3 Grand Prix. Oscar's won 9 Grand Prix in 3 years. He is tied with Mark Webber for the 3rd most successful Australian driver ever in Formula One. And his story's only just beginning. And the way I look at this is, he's 24. He's ahead of schedule in terms of what the normal Formula One driver career arc is. And as disappointing as it is to see he led 15 out of the 24 rounds, he was the leader at the end of 15 rounds this year. And to see it sort of just peter out the way that it did, it sort of shows two things at the same time. It shows you how far he's come and how fast he's come, but it also shows you how much there is still to go, like how much more headroom there is with him. And I think, when you get over the disappointment that, he had a snowball's chance in hell of winning the championship in that final round, and we kind of knew how that played out, but there's so much upside with him still because he is ahead of schedule. And that's the thing you've got to try and remember in all of this, is that he's so young in his Formula One journey. And I think the other thing for me is that what he's done this year, it's been amazing. Like you were saying, the headlines and the publicity and the interest, it's not looked like it's that surprising though at the same time. Like it's looked completely legitimate. Like he didn't feel like some sort of gatecrasher to the party or some sort of outlier. He feels like he belongs in that company. That was
totally,
and that was probably the biggest takeaway out of all of this, because we thought that he could be that good based on what he'd done in the junior categories. And in fact, he won a couple of races last year, and we could see it. But until you see someone in a proper championship fight like this, it's just more concept than reality, right? It's like, oh, we think he could do this, but now we've got proof that he can. And so I think that's the really exciting thing. His Formula One journey is still so young in the grand scheme of things. And we know that if he has the car and now he has the experience of what it's like to be in one of these championship fights, I don't see any reason why he couldn't be up there again. The big asterisk with all of this is because 2026, you've got this huge rule reset, which is as close to a clean sheet of paper as you can have for Formula One. And so we don't really know what the pecking order is going to be. We'll find out from Melbourne next year. If McLaren get it right, then there's no reason to believe he might not be up there anymore. But in terms of the Norris thing, the papaya rule strikes me as one of those things that they probably all sat around a boardroom table at Woking there and said, oh, this would be a good, way to describe the rules of engagement. It's one of those things that should never have left that room, in that the moment that term became public, that was the worst part about the entire thing, because whatever they were doing now had a name, right? And so people could go back and refer to this thing when it wasn't advantaging one driver or another, because I'm sure there were points of the season where we know how tribal Formula One is. The very pro Lando fans wouldn't have been very happy with the fact that Piastri was getting X, Y, and Z. So you're never going to make everyone happy in that regard. They never should have let the name become public, for starters. Also, anything that sounds like it was conceived in a marketing meeting that sounds brilliant within the four walls of the organisation and just stinks for everybody else, no one likes the term, because it's just objectively a crap term. Let's just not make two bones about it. Don't make it public. That's the first thing.
I just feel like, a lot of what McLaren do, it's just the PR game.
Correct.
When Lando came out talking about, well, there will be repercussions for me, and it's just like, why are you saying that? Like, you're just making it worse. And then, because the whole perception of Lando being favoured in the team, and then Zach Brown coming out and saying something glowingly about Oscar. Like, the timing is just it just looks like it's all PR. And same with their social media content. Oh, the fans will be up in arms because of something that's happened in a race that seems to have favoured Lando. And then they come out with a glowing post about Oscar. And it's like, oh, please. Like, we can all see through this, guys. We're not stupid.
It feels really sort of reactionary, like they're jumping at shadows a little bit. The only thing I'll say about the Norris thing, and this is probably not a super popular opinion, and I've mentioned this before, and some people nod and some people completely disagree with me, so I'll be curious to see what you say about this, but I never saw what they were doing as overtly favouring Lando at all costs. I more looked at it as, it's logical that if you've invested 7 years in someone and brought them through, and all the money and the resource and all the time you've put into somebody, if you had a choice whether you would like that guy or the other guy to be the person that wins the world championship, you're always, logically you would prefer, well, A, you want to win the championship first. B, you would prefer the person that you've invested all the time, money and effort in, just from a financial and business point of view. That's proof of that completely justifies every dollar you've ever spent on this program to get Norris to the World Championship, irrespective of whether, and
equals favouring Lando. And yes, for all those reasons that you've said, okay, that makes sense.
Well, my question is, okay, let's just flip the roles here. Let's say that Piastri had been in at McLaren since he was 17. And they bought him through and spent all the time and money and investment. And Norris, they plucked out of another team because the other team left a loophole open in his contract, like Alpine did with Piastri. So Norris this year was kind of the homegrown driver, and Piastri was the import that they bought in because he was available and just happens to be really, really good. I don't buy into the whole British bias thing, because McLaren is predominantly owned by the Bahraini royal family, and they have an American CEO and an Italian team principal. It's not a British, it's a New Zealand name, let's be honest, if you go back that far.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's some sort of great British conspiracy theory, but to me, it's just a return on investment. I think if Piastri had have been the homegrown guy they'd bought in since he was 17, Norris was the guy they picked up from Williams because they hadn't signed him or something or other back in the day. You can't help but subconsciously think that was part of what was going on there in terms of the return on investment. And
I could almost see a conversation in the background of Zach Brown saying to Lando, or maybe Lando's little team, or team, maybe not so little, Lando will win the first championship for McLaren. Don't worry. We've backed Lando for 7 years, 8 years, whatever. Lando will be the first one to win a driver's championship. And then just maybe that's a private conversation just within a small group. But all the actions that happen were to Lando's, not all, but a lot of, just the team calls, the strategy calls. It was favouring their long-term investment, if you like.
Yeah, I mean, look, the one you can sort of do the whole argument that the end justifies the means, right? Because they got what they wanted in the end. They got a world champion, just fell over the line. But so there were a lot of things that happened this year where you can just sort of shrug your shoulders and say whatever. The one to me that was still the biggest overreach was Monza.
Oh yeah.
To my mind, things like getting caught up in somebody else's drama or accident or racing someone or dodgy pit stops is just part of racing, and that's what happens. And that felt like a massive overreach at the time. The only sort of asterisk I'll give them at that point was because back in Monza, no one expected Max Verstappen had a chance of winning the world championship. That was the beginning of the Verstappen run. He was still miles off at that point. So it still looked like the whole world championship was going to be Norris or Piastri, and Verstappen was not going to be a factor at all. So that probably played into the thinking. Regardless, it was a massive overreach at the time because you're now starting to legislate against bad luck. And
exactly.
You can't do that.
No, and like Monza was also the start of Oscar's bad run.
Correct.
In the season as well.
Yep.
And I can't help but feel that call in Monza really upset him. And as a result, he just didn't perform in the next few races. He was dealing with the, like you see a lot of drivers, who am I? I'm not an expert. I'm just someone that loves Formula One, right? But my opinion is that when you see a lot of drivers that if they're struggling with politics in the team or struggling with stuff going on in their head, they don't seem to perform as well on track. It's the drivers who are really relaxed, who are really secure, who feel confident in their team, and they've got a long-term contract. They're the ones that seem to more easily get better results. So I feel like that Monza call was and Oscar even said that he didn't feel great after that in an interview. So I feel like that was, not only the start of Max starting to catch up, but also of Oscar's slump in form in that mid part of the season. But it was really, really good to see Oscar come back fighting and finish the season with some really strong results and performance. I also feel like Oscar doesn't get intimidated by Max, whereas I feel like Lando, up until maybe midway through this season, would feel intimidated. Like he'd see Max in his review mirrors and would, I don't know, almost freak out. Like that's how it felt to me.
I don't disagree at all. I mean, you go back as recently as the start of the race in Las Vegas, where Norris was anticipating Verstappen being incredibly aggressive off the start and tried to match him aggression for aggression and completely stuffed it up and lost that race at the first corner. So it feels that Verstappen's very good at getting in people's heads as part of what makes him as good as what he is. But I still think he feels he could probably get in Lando's head much more than he could get in Oscar's, because Oscar will give as good as he gets. And I still think Lando could probably be bullied a little bit. And the word I kept using towards the end of the season as Verstappen just kept ticking off win after win after win is that I said Norris is hearing footsteps. And they're not just normal footsteps of someone pursuing you. They're footsteps of a 4-time world champion who deep down and he knows that he's probably got you covered in terms of the mental robustness side. And I mean, I couldn't think of another driver paying testament to Max here. He was 104 points off the lead and he lost the world championship by 2 points. It's absolutely astonishing. There is no other driver in Formula One that could have done that. And it's testament to just how unbelievably good he was this year. And I know he didn't win the world championship, but I reckon this is the best Verstappen we've ever seen.
Considering the car that they had as well.
Absolutely.
It's absolutely phenomenal. And I feel really sorry for Kimi Antonelli, who you probably saw the clip of him going up to Max and saying, I'm so sorry, for the race before in Qatar, where Kimi made a little mistake that allowed Norris to pass him and finish the race in fourth and gain 3 more points. Had that not happened, it would have been a different result. It did, completely.
I
know, but Kimi felt so bad for it. And it was really nice for Max just to say, don't worry about it, mate. This is racing. I'm not worried.
And isn't it funny how, because Kimi Antonelli is a kid, he's 19 years old, and Max was doing the wise elder statesman, arm around your shoulder. It's okay, young fella, it's fine. And, this is where Max is now. He's in his late 20s and he's like one of these senior sort of statesmen. Don't worry, young fella, you'll be all right. So it was kind of, it was nice that there's the naivety, and you can see how young Antonelli is by feeling like he needed to apologise for something like that. But then Max has done the sort of the older brother thing and said, it's okay, you'll be fine.
Yeah, which is really nice to see. I really liked mature Max. Like young, petulant Max, I found really hard to support. He was just...
We were saying this on the Fox podcast earlier this week. The thing I've liked about Verstappen this year, I really like underdog Max.
Yeah, me too.
It's really fun to watch him go into these races like, well, you should have absolutely no business being up the front here because the car is so inferior. And then he'll go and put it on pole. And you're thinking, how on earth did he do that? And so I actually enjoyed Max much more this year because he shouldn't have done anywhere near the results that he did and still managed to do it. It was actually really fun.
And I'm enjoying his interviews as well. It's like, it means nothing to me. I've already got 4 world championships, If I get another one, that's nice. But
Sure.
Just all of those kind of little mind games. And you can call me Chucky, when he was responding to Zach Brown's comment of him being like a horror show character. Yeah, he does. And, he's just a lot more relaxed, a lot more confident. I was watching him closely thinking, is being a father going to change how you race? Are you going to take less risks now that you've got a baby? But I don't think it's affected his racing at all.
I reckon you mentioned sort of young, petulant, over-aggressive Max. I think where he's so much more complete now, and this is obviously just a function of age and experience, he still has the aggression in there. He just deploys it sometimes, not all the time. And so in the past, he was the most predictable guy of all time in wheel-to-wheel battle because he'd probably do something that was a bit on the edge and, he clashed with Daniel when they were teammates at Red Bull. It was really inevitable it was going to end up like that. Now it's more the intimidation factor is like, well, he might do it, even though he doesn't. So it's, that's in there with him. Is he going to choose to deploy it this time or not? Like, it's intimidating when he doesn't do it because that he could. And that's part of sort of the evolution of Max as a driver, I think. I'm just more curious. I mean, now you're in this podcast space and there's, it's a bit travel, it's a bit Formula One, it's a bit old school, it's a bit new school. The reception that you've had to this, I'm sure would be pretty gratifying for you because, there is such a target market for this out there now because, you're a sort of rusted on old F1 fan, so am I. I've been in it for long enough. But you now know that in the past, when you were a Formula One fan, you'd sort of mention it to people and they'd blankly look at you and go, oh, what's that? Or they'd stop the conversation.
Yeah, cars going around in circles, yeah.
Yeah. Whereas these days, for people that either well or a little bit, you're now the F1 person. They want to talk to you about it. And what about what Lando Norris did? And what's going on with this McLaren bloke? And tell us about this and tell us about that. It's so funny, isn't it, how things have shifted now. Everyone wants to talk to you about something that they would have just completely shut the conversation down 10 years previously.
I've got to mention this guy, Sean Bloxridge, who is Mr. Ecotourism, Mr. Environmentalist. He runs a wonderful small tour company in Margaret River where he takes a group of up to 6 guests canoeing on the actual Margaret River. So that there is a river in Margaret River, which is also a town and a region. It was a couple of years ago. He pulled me up at a tourism function I was at and he said, Di, I've got to talk to you about Formula One. I hate everything that Formula One stands for, the excesses, the money, just all of it. He said, but watch Drive to Survive and I'm totally addicted to it.
Yeah.
To the sport. And I'm like, once you get a taste of that high octane fuel, that's...
It's so true. And it even goes down to the drivers. I remember Daniel telling me once that I think he was in New York and he's walking along and this young girl had literally got herself run over by trying to cross the street because she'd seen him to run over and talk to him. And the first thing she said was, I really wanted to meet you. I really liked you in season 3. Like he was in a sitcom or he was part of like a trilogy of movies or whatever it was. It's not like, and he sort of stopped to process it as like, so now I'm just like some sort of like TV serial person. Is that the way it works? Like forget the driving and everything else. I liked you in season 3. It's like she's watching Friends or something.
Seinfeld. Geez.
Yeah, literally. So funny.
I do love being, the kind of go-to person in my little orbit of people that want to talk about Formula One, because for years I had hardly anyone I could talk about F1 to, hardly anyone. And even my husband, when I met him, he wasn't into it. And I didn't read in the riot act, but it was more or less, well, you need to show some interest in this, or we're going to have a problem. Well, Matt, let's round this off with the 3 questions that I ask all of the guests that come onto the podcast. If you could have a holiday with any Formula One driver, dead or alive, who would you choose to go on holiday with and why?
That would be super interesting. I'll say Michael Schumacher. Everything would be very, very orderly and done on time. He's a very, very interesting chat as a one-on-one. And if we got sick of each other, we'd be fine in each other's company. We're not having to associate with one another. So that would be fine. You get some alone time too.
Have you ever interviewed him?
Yeah, many, many times. He's a famously intense. There's no room for, there's no sort of stone left unturned. Everything's very, very Teutonic, like everything's super, super organized. But a guy that would always give you something and had that real sort of personal side to him.
Next question. I know you kind of answered this earlier in the podcast, but I'll ask it again. If you could holiday in any Formula One destination, whether it's on the race calendar at the moment or not, where would you choose to go on a holiday and why?
I'm very, very bad at relaxing. I'm hopeless at it. The idea of sitting on a beach and I'd get bored in 7.5 minutes probably. I need to be doing things. So it would need to be a big city somewhere where there's things that I can go and do and experience and see. And so any chance you get to be in Japan and you can, because their rail system there is so brilliant, you can absolutely go and spend a day or 2 in Tokyo on the way back, which, being in the heart of that place for 24, 48 hours is always lots of fun. Usually for me, it's dictated by things to do and food. They'll be the things they'll be the things that get me interested in being somewhere or staying somewhere. And that's why Barcelona rates really, really highly.
And the next question is related to food. So I don't know if you're much of a cook at home, but if you could cook any cuisine that's from a Formula One destination, what would you cook and why?
That's an interesting one, because if I was to cook something that I know I could get better elsewhere and I'm just going to be disappointed with my own cooking, it's one of those things. I could do it and you just eat it and go, it's probably better somewhere else. It would be, I don't know. That's a really interesting one. I do cook infrequently, but I do cook. I do in that situation. I always think it's very hard to go past really, really good Spanish, like I mentioned before, which is part of the reason I love Barcelona so much. It would be great to know how to do that. But I'm a little bit spoiled. My father-in-law is a chef. I've been a little bit spoiled in that regard. So, I'm more someone who cooks the survival mechanism more than actually trying to do anything particularly interesting. So I'll leave it to the experts.
Fair enough. Wowzers. Well, what a great chat. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Matt Clayton. You can listen to Matt on Pit Talk podcast, which is a Fox Sports podcast.
Correct.
It's been an absolute pleasure. We haven't chatted for a long time. I really enjoyed this chat. Thank you so much, Matt.
Yeah, me too. Thanks so much for having me on.
If you've got any thoughts on the season that we've just had, on Lando's win, on Oscar's future, feel free to drop us a line. We'd love to hear from you. We're on all the social media platforms, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. And you can also email us, and away we go, f1podcast@gmail.com. And I just want to give a heartfelt thanks to you, the listeners of And Away We Go F1 Podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure to produce this show every week, to source some interesting guests for you. I've really enjoyed the guest episodes, hearing all their stories, some that go back like 40 years and others in more recent times, and their interactions with Formula One supremos like Matt Clayton, or Ayrton Senna like Annie Bradshaw, or what it was like to cook for the Mercedes Formula One team during their dominant era with chef Jason Best. It's been an absolute privilege to produce and host this show this year, the first year of And Away We Go F1 Podcast. I'm going to take a break now because next week is Christmas. Like, how did that happen? Wishing you and yours a very safe and happy festive season. I know Christmas can be tricky for some people, so I hope you're able to reach out to some special people, some loved ones, and have a really beautiful day and a safe and prosperous and happy 2026. I'll be back in the new year with some interesting episodes featuring some podcast recordings that we've had to leave on the cutting room floor just because there wasn't time. There might be some highlights in there. And I also want to share my interviews that I did with the F1 Academy drivers and Nicole Piastri and Oscar's performance coach from the F1 exhibition in Melbourne. Thank you again. Well, that's it for this year. Thank you again. I love having you in this Formula One community. Again, thank you for having us in your ears. It's been an absolute privilege to produce and host this show. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please tell all your friends about it. And I look forward to being back in the new year with some fresh content for you. So in the meantime, all the very best until next year. And until lights out.
It's lights out and away we go.
And Away We Go podcast is produced by Diane Bortoletto.
Let's do it.